Thank you for purchasing the files to my custom jazz figure. This was made in collaboration with Hobbies with Jose, so if you want to check out how he did the initial concept sketches and printed off his own copy, or how I designed the 3D model, well, those videos are linked in the description below. To begin with, this print is not like my Seekers. You're not going to be using filament pins, you're going to be using 1mm metal pins. And make sure you've got some super glue for the color panels. Regardless of what type of prints you're using, you're probably going to need to run auto repairs on some of the pieces. They've got a couple twisted normals here and there from how complex it was getting, but once you've done that, it should just print nicely. If you're using an FDM printer like me, I've got some recommended print settings for you. Make sure you slice at a 0.10mm layer height, and I find an infill of 15% works well. For certain tiny color panel pieces and the glass, I recommend using a brim. So with all that out of the way, it's time for the assembly process.
Alright, so let's begin with the torso. To start off with, you're going to want to make sure you have your primary torso piece and its grill pieces. The side angle grills can be a bit of a pain. You have to wedge it in from the bottom first and then sort of angle the top in. If you get it just right, it should just fit, but sometimes they need a little bit of sanding. For the center grill, we're going to make sure we put a little bead of super glue down the channel, and then we'll fit it right in. Now for the headlights. They have a specific way they go, they're on a slight curve, so make sure you get the right one, put some super glue down, and then fit them in. Once your headlights are in place, you can grab your middle stripe piece, and it's got a slight curve to it. Add some super glue down the channel, and insert your stripe color panel. Once the glue's all dried, we can move on to the waist. You're going to want your main waist panel, and you're going to line it up on the bottom of the torso plate. Now we're going to take our little clippers and chop off the ends of our 1mm diameter pins, and just slide them into the sides, locking that waist panel in place. Next up, we're going to get our main waist piece, and make sure that that central block with the tab is sticking straight down. Then we can cut up some more of our 1mm pins, and we're going to insert those into the slots. These can be a little bit tricky to stay in place, so I find sometimes adding a little bit of super glue on the cap can help. Next up, it's time for the arms. We're going to want to make sure we got our shoulder hinge piece, and we're going to be assembling the left arm. Now I know this is the correct piece for the left arm because it's got a curve that goes upwards. Next we're going to get our shoulder piece that has the hole at the back, and we're going to line it up into place. Once you've wedged that in, we can get another one of our pins and line it up. Trim it to fit, and now we can get our shoulder tire hinge. Now this has a weird 2-pin setup, but it can only fit in one way. Once you get it lined up, you can grab your pins and again, fit it all in place. Once that's sorted, we can get our shoulder tire. Now this is different to the rear tires because they are much thinner. Now we can get our hubcap and just pressure fit it into place. Now we can slide a pin all the way down, and once we've got that all lined up, we can trim the tip slightly, and now we can add a tiny dot of super glue into that shoulder hinge piece and insert the pin. We want to make it so that the pin is glued to the inside of the hinge, but we're not gluing the wheel stuck. Make sure you can still freely spin the wheel while it's drying, and you should be good to go. Now we want our elbow connector. It's this weird little piece with the mushroom peg. We're going to line that up at the bottom of our shoulder, and once again insert a pin through it. Once that's set up, we can move on to the forearms. Make sure you get the correct forearm. Since I'm doing the left arm, I want to make sure the thinner side is on the inside of the arm. Now we're going to get our elbow piece, and that's got a little ridge detail in the middle, and that wants to be facing forwards. Line it up into the forearm, insert a pin, and once that's all sorted, you should be able to just slide it onto the mushroom cap. You may find with printer tolerances that these joints can be a bit loose, so if that's the case for you, then make sure you put a little bit of super glue in the gaps and hinges and move it as it's drying. Finally, we can take our fist, and this should just slide in from the bottom. There's alternate hands available, so you can just mix and match, although he's only able to transform with the default closed fists. Since this is symmetrical, just do the other arm the exact same way, and now we can move on to the head and the neck. Now we're going to make sure we get our neck block and the correct stripe piece. Our stripe piece has a little indent, which should help it line up perfectly into the neck block. So add a little bit of super glue and apply pressure till it's dry. Once that's sorted, we can grab our main helmet piece. Now we're going to give him his visor. It's got a slight little ridge at the top. So add some super glue into the main helmet and line up the ridge. That way you can't get it upside down by accident. Once the visor's glued in place, we can take our faceplate. Once that's sorted, we can rotate it onto the ball joint. This will sand any excess filament and help it fit nice and tight. Once that's sorted, we can move on to attaching it to the torso. You're going to want to grab everything you've got so far and the two bonnet top pieces. First up, you're going to want to slide the shoulders in from the side. They should make a nice little popping sound when they get into place. Once that's sorted, insert some pins into the side of the neck block. You're going to want to make sure there's only a tiny bit sticking out, otherwise it's not going to fit. Now make sure that the bonnet tops are on either side of the neck block and add some super glue to the torso. Now this is the trickiest part to do in the entire assembly process, and that's sliding this all together and sandwiching it. Everything's going to want to fly apart on you, and this clip here took about 3 minutes of finagling. Once you've got it lined up correctly though, push it down and the super glue should do its job. Now we can fold down the waist pieces and connect them together. Okay, next up is the door wings. We're going to want to get this teeny tiny little stripe piece, and we're going to add a little bit of super glue to the front glass frame piece, and make sure we line it up in the little recess. Once that's done, add some super glue to the main front, and attach your glass panel. Once that's done, add some super glue to the side, and add the side glass panel. Once that's nice and in there, you can line it up with your main door piece and insert it into the smaller of the two ridges. Insert a pin from the back. Depending on the size of your pins, you may need to use two to sort of shove the central one all the way through, but once it's done, it should be able to fold down flush on the back. Once you've done both of them, you can attach them to your torso. You're going to want to make sure you slide it over that sort of loop on the back of his shoulders, and then insert a pin from the top. Once you've got that all the way in, your door wings are done. Now we're going to make a start on the legs with our foot. These are symmetrical, so just repeat each steps for both legs. This is one of the easier pieces to assemble, only 4 individual parts. And we're going to take this stripe color panel. It's got a slight bevel on one side. We want to make sure that lines up with the correct foot block. Add some super glue to the recess, line it up, and wait for the glue to dry. Once that's sorted, you can add some super glue to the side of the piece and attach your glass panel. Make sure not to push too hard, this can snap the side. Now we're going to add our actual foot. Now this has a thicker side and a thinner side. We're doing the left leg here, so I know the thicker side is going to go on the inside. Line up the pinholes and insert the pin. Once that's sorted, your foot's done and ready to go. Now it's time for the bumper. This has got lots of teeny tiny fiddly little color pieces, so be very careful not to lose any of them. We're going to insert our main color stripe into the bumper piece with a bit of super glue. And the same for our tail light. Sometimes sliding it in from the side makes it fit better, other times it needs a bit of sanding to fit. Once that's done, we can add this tiny speck of black in the corner. And we can add some super glue on the top to insert our glass pane. Now we're going to take our spoiler and slide it into the gap. Now we're going to take a pin, line it up with the hole in the spoiler, and clip it so it fits. Once that's sorted, you should be able to push the spoiler all the way down and it'll be nice and flush. Now we can add our leg connector bar. We're going to attach it to this weird L-shaped slot. We're going to add a tiny dab of super glue so the pin doesn't escape on us, and insert the pin all the way through. This is a weird, slidey, rotating mechanism that'll help fill out the back of the car later on. Next, it's time for the main leg piece. We're going to start off with the front leg panel and its color grille. We'll put a bit of super glue in the recess and attach the vent detailing. Next, we're going to take our rear tires and insert the hubcaps. Now we're going to put a pin all the way through it, and we can insert it into the side of the main leg piece. Now we can insert some super glue on the side of the leg and attach our 2 glass pieces. Once that's sorted, we can take our back leg piece, put some super glue on it, and attach the final piece of glass. Once that's sorted, we can insert some more super glue into that recess on the side and attach our color stripe. This has again got a slight curve to it, so it'll only want to fit in a specific way. Now that that's sorted, we can work our way around to the back, and we can attach another tiny detail plate. Then we're going to add some more super glue, and we're going to keep attaching all the various details. This piece has a slight curve to it, so again, it'll only fit the one way. And we're going to do the same for the light bar at the top. Now that that's all sorted, we can cut a pin to size and attach our back panel. We're going to slide it into the pinholes, line it up, and shove it in. Now that's sorted, we can grab our front panel, and again, line it up with the pinholes and insert the pins. We're going to have one on the top and one on the bottom. Next up, we're going to grab our upper leg piece. Again, this is the left leg because the mushroom peg slot is on the inside of the leg. Now we're going to grab our bumper piece, and we're going to insert that into the slot at the bottom. Now we're going to put a pin through it, and we want to make sure that we've got a large amount of the pin sticking out one side. Super glue it if you have to stop it from shifting. Now we're going to put some super glue in that upper hole, not the lower one, that's for the tire, and we're going to insert the pin that's on our upper leg, sandwiching it all together. Now we can slide up our bumper piece so that it's in the correct orientation for robot mode, and we can close the back on it, tabbing it together. The front panel doesn't necessarily click into place, but that slight lip does wrap around the upper leg. You may find due to printer tolerances that this can be quite loose, so I recommend adding some super glue into the side where the pieces interact and moving it back and forth to thicken it. Once you're satisfied, you can grab your foot, line it up on the bottom with the pinholes, add some super glue to stop the pin from falling out, and add another pin. Now that that's sorted, your leg's all done. So now it's time for the crotch and the final assembly. So we're going to take our front crotch piece, add some super glue into the recess, and add our color panel. Once that's sorted, we'll do the same for the blue pieces on either side. Finally, a little bit of super glue on the recesses on either side of his hips, so that we can add those grey panels. Once that's sorted, we can grab our hip pieces and assemble those. Now the mushroom pegs on these hips are actually off-center, and you want to make sure that they are facing more towards the front than the back. We're going to insert our hip hinge, and we're going to line up the pinholes. Then we're going to insert another pin, and it should be all done and dusted. Finally, we can take our back crotch half, attach it to the waist piece, attach our hips into the recess at the bottom, apply a liberal amount of super glue, and sandwich the two crotch pieces together. These pieces very much want to come apart, so do not let go until the super glue is fully dry. Once that's sorted, you can take your legs and rotate them until they line up into the mushroom pegs. And with all that, you've fully assembled Jazz into his robot mode. So, let's transform him now, shall we? First up, you're going to want to move his shoulder wheels up and out the way so that you can get his arms into a T-pose, and you're going to open his front leg panels. Now we can open the back leg panels and rotate the legs all the way around the crotch. And now you can fold your toe down. Second verse same as the first. So now we can rotate and pull that bumper piece so it's on the opposite end of our L shape. Now we can untab his waist panel and fold it up. And then we can rotate his waist 180 degrees. Now we're going to fold up those panels on the back of his doors. And now we're going to want to pull his waist so it goes all the way down the slider. Once that's sorted, we have enough clearance to move his head all the way down and out the way, and we can attach those glass panels. Once that's sorted, you should be able to rotate the legs into place and connect and line it all up. It could be a bit tricky at first, I'm not going to lie, but once you get it right, it should fit nice and snug. Once everything's lined up, you can connect the two bumper pieces together and rotate them into place. We can fold in those front panels. They might pop apart some of the bits you've just tapped in, but give it a squeeze and it'll all go back together. Now finally for the arms, we're going to want to make sure we push them in at the forearms and the shoulders so they're a little shorter. And once they've got enough clearance, you should be able to bend them backwards so that they fit into place. It might feel like it doesn't want to fit at first, but trust me, once you got the right angle, it just pings into place. And again, since he's all symmetrical, we're going to do the same thing on both sides. And there you go! You've just transformed Jazz into his alt mode. The last thing I want to mention is that he does have a spoiler, as you assembled earlier. To access this, you need to untransform the bumper piece and split it in half, and then you should be able to get the clearance to reach in and pull the spoiler sections out. They could be a bit stiff at first, but once you got it, you should be able to just pull and then sandwich the bumper all back together. And voila! You now have a spoiler on the back of your Jazz figure. So there you go! You finished assembling your own custom Jazz figure, designed by Nectar Mechanics and based off the sketches of Hobbies with Jose. If you want to see how Jose painted up his copy, or how I designed the 3D model, you can click on the videos linked on screen now.